Hello everybody and welcome. This is the Shy Hat, that's me, and we are HackerFrogs. Alright, so everybody, we're going to be doing HackerFrogs Python Programming Basics Part 4 today. And Charlie Tuna, hello, welcome, and welcome to the stream. All right, so we're doing Python Programming Basics Part 4. So this is Part 4 of an 8-part series on Python, learning how to do all of the basics inside of this programming language. And let's jump into what we're going to be doing today. But first, we're going to do a little review of what we did in the last session. If you missed the last session, that is perfectly okay, because we're going to be reviewing a little bit about what we did last session, and then we're going to jump into today's topics. All right, so this workshop is the 4th intro class to Python programming. During our last workshop, we learned about a few programming concepts through Python, including the following. We learned about lists, which are variables with one or more items associated with them. Items in the list can be referenced by a process called list indexing. And we learned about basic operand. Oh, we didn't learn about these things. We learned about strings last time, but that is okay. We're going to move on to this workshop's topics. So this workshop is going to deal with conditions in part 1, and then in part 2, we're going to go through programming loops. All right. So these are both very important concepts to understand as far as Python is concerned. So everybody, we're going to go through a lot of examples today. All right, so everybody, today we're going to be talking about conditions. So conditions are how programs make decisions as to which instruction to perform at a specific point in program execution. So basically in Python, conditions let the program know whether or not to take one instruction over another. So it's a fork in the path where the program can decide whether or not to execute one instruction over another instruction. So generally, conditions trigger when a statement evaluates to true or false. So this is an important concept. Let's discuss what this means exactly. So the basic conditional statement in Python is the if statement, and if statements are written in code blocks like the following. So we've got our program right here. It has one variable, password, equal to a string, my secret password. And the if statement is here. If the variable password is equal to the string, my secret password, then we're going to print password correct. Otherwise, else, we're going to print incorrect password. So it's going to print one message if the password variable is the string, this right here, my secret password, which will evaluate to Boolean true, and print another message if it is not, which is if it evaluates to Boolean false. So we're talking about Booleans today, and we'll talk about Booleans just after this. Okay, so if statements start with if, then a Boolean equation. So this is an example of a Boolean equation right here, then a semicolon. So if, and then the Boolean equation right here. So variable password is equal to my secret password, and then a semicolon. Then an indentation on the next line, followed by instructions if the condition is met. So if this condition is true, then it's going to do this instruction right here. So this is an example of a code block, and in Python, code blocks need to be indented. So indentation is basically leaving a number of spaces between the beginning of the code block and the instructions within the code block. But the only thing you have to worry about as far as indentation is concerned is that everything has to be indented to the same level. So the official Python documents say that indentation should be in segments of 4 spaces for an indent. In this case here, there's 4 spaces. But as long as you keep the indent consistent throughout the code, then it's fine. Then on the next line, we put else. So this is the thing that happens. This tells the program that if this statement is not true, then it's going to do something else. And then the instructions if the condition is not met. This also needs to be indented over here. So indent on the next line followed by instructions if the condition is not met. So if if this is true, then it's going to print password correct. If it is not true, it's going to print incorrect password. The else portion of the code block is optional. So we included an else keyword over here, which happens if this does not equate to true, but this is not necessary. You don't need to put an else statement if the situation doesn't call for it. So the else portion of the code block is optional. After the if statement code block finishes, program execution continues on the next line. So after the if code block finishes, then the program keeps on executing as normal. So we're talking about Boolean operators. We can use any of the above Boolean operators in if statements. So in this case, we were using this double equal signs, which means Boolean equals, but there's also less than, greater than, not equal to, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So these are all operators we can use inside of our if statements in order to equate to true or false, depending on the circumstances. So when using the AND, so we can also use the AND operator when we're writing our if statements, which means that when we're writing our if statement, you can write two Boolean equations over here, and we're going to link them with the AND operator right here, which means that both statements to the right and left of the operator must be true in order for the overall statement to evaluate to true. So everybody, let's do a little bit of coding in order to understand this stuff better. Everybody, I'm going to include the link to the onlinepython.com website for everybody to practice with. So when you load up onlinepython.com, there's already going to be some code included on the page. What I want you to do is I want you to highlight that and delete all of that, and we're going to write our own code in its place. So in our case, we're going to choose birthday and today's date. Okay, so let's write some variables, birthday and today's date. And today is June 17th. And today's date, well, let's just say that the birthday is going to be June 17th, and today's date is also going to be June 17th. So we're going to write our if statement here. If birthday is equal to June 17th, and today's date is equal to June 17th, then something happens. So in this case, the online Python website automatically indents after you start your if statement, which is very handy. In this case, we're going to print happy birthday. Okay, so everybody, I'm going to, just in case you don't feel like typing all that out, I'm going to leave this in the chat, and you can just paste this into the website. Hopefully it also pastes in the indentation, otherwise this is not going to work. Okay, so this program right here is going to evaluate this Boolean statement right here. So if this is true, birthday equals June 17th, and this is true, today's date equals June 17th, it's going to print happy birthday. All right, so let's run this code. So we can click on run, and it's going to print happy birthday. We could also put an if-else statement over here, and if that is not the case, we're going to print it's not your birthday. Okay, so we're going to print happy birthday, or else we're going to print it's not your birthday. So let's just say that our birthday is December 31st. And then we'll try running this again, and in this case it should print it's not your birthday. So we run this again, and it says it's not your birthday. Why did I spell Why don't I spell birthday with capitalization? Okay. All right. So everybody, if you have any questions about what we've covered so far, go ahead and ask in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to move on with some more concepts about if statements. All right. So we've got the AND operator, which makes it so that it's a more specific filter over here. In this case, since the variable's birthday and today's date are the same day, in this case it's October 24th, the if statement returns true and the birthday, and the program will print happy birthday. So we also have the OR operator. When using the OR operator, either statement to the right or left of the operator must evaluate true for the overall statement to evaluate to true. So in this case, we've got a program here. It says favorite food equals spaghetti and hobby equals watching movies. And we have our if statement here, and it's if favorite food equals spaghetti or hobby equals classical painting, we're going to print let's take a vacation to Italy. And in this case, because one of these conditions is true, favorite food equals spaghetti, it's going to print out let's take a vacation to Italy, because the OR operator over here only needs one of these statements to evaluate to true in order to trigger. Okay? All right, so that's the OR operator. If the condition would not trigger if both statements to the left and right of the OR operator were false. So let's do a quick little program over here. So let's see. So it's not birthday, it's favorite food. And it's hobby. And my hobby is baseball. And my favorite food is sushi. So if favorite food is equal to sushi and or hobby equals baseball, we're going to print let's take a vacation to Japan. Or else we're going to print let's not go on vacation. All right, so in this case, because we've fulfilled both of these statements over here, it's going to print let's take a vacation to Japan. So we run that, and that's what it says. But if we were to change this so that both of these statements were false, so that say that we love hamburgers, and our hobby is stamp collecting, then it's not going to work. So if both of these are false, then it's going to print the other thing. Let's not go on vacation. All right, so let's continue on. So that was the OR operator. And here, the IN operator, this is a new type of operator that we use with the if statement. It's going to be used to check if there is a specific item within a container object, such as a list. So it could be a container object such as a list, or it could be a string. So anything with indexes, like a list. So in this case, we've got party guests, and if name, if the component is in party guests, it's going to print you're invited to the party. So we've got our variable name, which is equal to John, and we've got our list party guests, of which there are John, Sue, and Bobby. So this if statement is going to check if this variable name is included inside of this list. And if it is, it's going to print out you're invited to the party. Here the print instruction is executed because the string listed in the name variable is included as an item in the party guests list. Okay, so this next one is a little bit, can be a little bit confusing. This is the is operator. The is operator is used to compare whether an object is exactly referencing another object, as opposed to matching the values contained within. So here we've got three variables. We have a list. So x is a list with these three numbers. Y is equal to x, which means that y is x. And then there's z, which is another list with the same three numbers as x. So if we're to print, is x equal to z? So x and z both are lists with the same contents. So that's going to evaluate to true. But if we were to print out x is z, because these are two different objects in Python, so they're two different objects even though their values are the same, that's going to evaluate to false. But if we were to try to compare x is y, because y is equal to x, then it's going to evaluate to true. So at the beginner level, you don't really need to know too much about this, but you should be aware that, that this operator exists and can be used in if statements. All right, so another slightly more advanced operator over here is the not operator. And the not operator is essentially an inversion of whatever Boolean value is paired with it. So I'm not completely sure what the correct use case of the not operator is, but it basically inverses whatever is paired with it. So not true is equal to false, and not false is equal to true. So in this case, we've got this if statement over here. If telling the truth, and telling the truth is a variable set to false. If telling the truth is equal to not false, which means true, it's going to print you're telling the truth. Otherwise, it's going to print you're lying. And in this case, it prints you're lying because telling the truth is false, but we're looking for not false, if that makes any sense. All right, so the important concept we have to understand as far as Boolean statements are concerned is that true is the number 1 and false is the number 0. So if you've worked with other programming languages before, you might be familiar with this concept already. But if something is equal to 0, that means it's false. And if something is equal to 1, that means it's true. So in Python, so we've got two variables here, var a, which is equal to 1, and var b, which is equal to 0. So 1 and true are essentially the same thing in Python as far as Boolean true and false are concerned. So if var a equals true, we're going to print in Python 1 and true are considered the same. So this 1 here might as well equal to true because this prints out here. And if var b equals false, we're going to print likewise 0 and false are considered the same. So var b equals 0, and 0 in terms of booleans is equal to false. So these two statements print out because in Python this is true. True is 1 and false is 0. Okay, so everybody, we're going to go over to the learnpython.org website in order to work through some exercises that have to do with Python conditions. So let's go over to learnpython.org, and I will link the web page in the chat. So everybody, let's get going over to the website. So here, Python uses Boolean logic to evaluate conditions. The Boolean's values true and false are returned when an expression is compared or evaluated. For example, okay, so we've got variable x equals 2, and If we were to print out this, x equals 2, it's going to print out true. If we're going to print x is equal to 3, that is not true, it's going to print out false. And x is greater than 3. X is less than 3. X is less than 3 is also true, so that's also going to print out true. So if we're to run this, then these three statements print out exactly as predicted. But if we were to change the value of x, so if we were to change this to 3, then it would come out x is equal to 2 is false, x is equal to 3 is true, and then x is less than 3 would also print out false. Okay, so it would come out false, true, false. All right, let's move on. Note that variable assignment is done with a single equals operator, equals, whereas comparison between two variables is done with the double equals operator. So remember, when we're just assigning values to variables, we use the single equal sign. But if we're comparing two things, we have to use the double equal sign. And the not equals operator is marked as exclamation point equals, sometimes called bang equals. So the and or Boolean operators allow building complex Boolean expressions. For example, we've got this right here. If name is equal to John and age is equal to 23, then we're going to print out your name is John and you are also 23 years old. And the second statement we have here is if name is equal to John or name is equal to Rick, it's going to print out your name is either John or Rick. So when we run this, because all of this is true, then it's going to print out both of these statements. But if we were to change this, if we were to change the age to 24, then this is not going to print out anymore. And if we change the name to Stephen, then this is not going to print out either. So when we run this, neither of these print statements are going to run. So we hit run and then nothing happens. Okay. All right, so next is the in operator here. So we were just talking about this. It is used to check if a specified object exists within an iterable object container, such as a list. So we've got name equals John. If the name is in this list right here, John or Rick, it's going to print your name is either John or Rick. So we can run this. And this prints out because one of these names inside the list is equal to the thing that we're comparing here, which is the name, which is name equals John. Okay, so the next section talks about indentation. So Python uses indentation to define code blocks instead of brackets. So if you know other programming languages such as C or JavaScript, it's going to use, or PHP for that matter, it's going to use brackets to create code blocks instead of what Python uses, which is indentation. The standard Python indentation is 4 spaces, although tabs and any other space size will work as long as it is consistent. So notice that code blocks do not need any termination. So here's an example of using Python's if statement using code blocks. So in Python, basically you just need to know that any statement that ends in a colon inside of Python is going to create a code block. So this is going to create a code block right here because there's a colon. This is also going to create a code block, and this is also going to create a code block right here. But what's going on over here? So statement is false, another statement is true. If the statement is true, it's going to do something. Or else if this is another thing that you can put inside your if code blocks. So elif, which stands for else if, is something that happens Or so basically, if statements are going to do the thing, but if not, you can use elif to do something else. But if none of these other things happen, you can use the else keyword to do another thing. So let's just let's try illustrating this just so that it becomes a little more clear. Okay, so we've got favorite color. Favorite color is equal to blue. And if favorite color is equal to blue, print your favorite color is blue, else you're going to print color is not blue. So, okay, but we're going to create one more condition over here in case your favorite color is red. So, elif if favorite color is red, print color is red. Okay, and if none of these, if neither of these are applicable, you're going to say your favorite color is neither blue nor red. Okay, I think this is, so if we print this, it's going to say that your favorite color is blue. Okay, it says invalid syntax. So what did I do with this elif statement here? Okay, so what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to ask ChatGPT if it knows what's wrong with this code. This is so if you've got some code and for some reason it's erroring out and you're not too sure what to make of it, you can ask ChatGPT and what's wrong with the Python code, and just paste in the Python code. Charlie Tuna asks, don't you need the if inside the elif? Let's see. Okay. So elif is another if statement. Okay, so you have to put the Boolean evaluation inside of elif over here. Okay. All right. So that's what we need to do. So elif replaces if in this case. So if we were to run this, it says your favorite color is blue, but if we change this to red, then the elif is going to activate and it's going to say your favorite color is red. But if we say that our favorite color is green, then the else is going to activate. Okay. So run this, and it says your favorite color is neither blue nor red. So if it's blue, then this happens, but if it's red, then this happens. But if it's neither blue nor red, then this happens. Okay. All right, let's go back to the learnpython.org over here. So we've got x equals 2, if x equals 2, print this, else print this. Okay, that's simple enough. So here we're talking about the is operator. So unlike the double equals operator, the is operator does not match the values of the variables, but the instances themselves. So this is where we're talking about being an exact copy of an object as opposed to just having the values equal. So in this case, when we print x is equal to y, meaning that the values of these two variables are equal, that's going to print out true. But x is y is going to print out false because they're not the same object. It's just that the values inside of those objects are equal. All right, and then we're going to skip down to the not operator. Using not before a Boolean expression inverts it. So print not false, that's going to print out to true, and print not false, meaning true, is equal to false, is also going to print out false. So like I said, in my experience, I haven't had to use the not operator very much when I've been coding in Python, but we should be aware that it exists. All right, so we've come up on the exercise for this section. So we're going to change the variables in the first section so that each of the statements is going to resolve to true. So everybody, let's try solving this together. So we've got our number, we've got our second number, we've got our first array, and we've got our second array. So each one of these we need to modify so that everything is going to equate to true. So if number, the variable number, is less than 15, is that less than? No, that's greater than 15. We're going to print true. So all we need to do is make sure that the number variable is greater than 15. So we can make this number variable 16, for example, and that's going to make it true. So in this case, we have this other condition, if first array, print 2. So in this case, if first array is equal to the statement, if first array exists. So if first array means if first array is not empty, basically. So first array, we need to make sure that there's something inside of first array. In this case, we could put some numbers in here, and in that case, first array is not false. It's true because it has some stuff inside of it. So we're going to print 2 on line 13 if the length of second array is equal to 2. We're going to print 3. Okay, so we're looking at the length of the second array, and the length of the second array is 3 because there are 3 objects inside of here. So all we need to do is delete one of the objects, and then the length of the second array is going to equal 2. And here, if the length of the first array and the length of the second array is equal to 5, then it's going to be true. So we have to manipulate the length of the first array and the length of the second array so that it's equal to 5. So we know that the length of the second array has to be 2, so the length of the first array has to be 3. So we can go back up here, and we need to make sure that the length of the first array is 3. So we've got 3 objects in here, so that's fine. Okay, and the last thing over here is if not second number. So remember that not means in inverse. So not second number equals second number doesn't exist. So second number is false. So you can also make the second number equal to 0, and that's also going to satisfy this condition because 0, remember that 0 in Python equals false. So second number, we can make this the number 0. Okay, so I think that is all of the conditions we need to satisfy. And we click on submit. And it says, great work. We have done all of this. Okay. All right. So everybody, let's move on over to our quiz for this particular section. All right. So everybody, please take a look at this question here and answer what the output is going to be, either A, B, C, or D. Hacking equals 1. If hacking is equal to true, we're going to print we're hacking. Please type your answer in the chat. So is the output going to be we're hacking? Is the output going to be true? Is nothing going to print because hacking does not equal true? Or nothing will print because the syntax is incorrect? So Charlie Tuna says C. All right, so everybody, the answer is, what it's going to print out is we're hacking because the number, remember that the number 1 inside of Python is basically the same as saying the number is the same as saying true as far as booleans are concerned. So we can take this this code over here and we can copy it over to the online Python website over here. So if hacking equals true, we're going to print we're hacking. Oh, okay, we need to change out the, we need to change this out right here. The syntax is not true, okay. We're hacking, all right. I need to change that in my slides. All right, so just, this is just to point out that the numbers 1 and 0 are equivalent to true and false, respectively, as far as booleans are concerned. All right, so everybody, we're going to move on to our second topic of the day, and that's going to be programming loops. But before we move on into programming loops, I need to ask everybody to please tell us which organization you're here with. I need to take some attendance because Black Girls Hack and Women's Society of Cyberjitsu, they would like it if I were to take attendance for each one of these workshops. So if you're here with either Black Girls Hack, please type BGH in chat, or if you're with Women's Society for Cyberjitsu, please type in chat WSC. So while we're waiting for the answers to come in, I'd just like to point out that HackerFrogs has a Reddit page where we post all about how to get into cybersecurity, and we talk about what we're going to be streaming each week. As well, we post a lot about free network resources, such as computer general skills and networking education resources, or Linux resources, or let's see, Python language education resources. This would be very useful for everybody who's taking this course right now. I'll include that link in chat. All right, and let's get back to our Python programming lesson. All right, so we're talking about programming loops. So programming loops are tools that programmers use to run the same instructions multiple times. So this instruction over here is for I in range 4, you're going to print I. Okay, so if we were to go to our online Python over here, for I in this is an example of a loop right here. So if we were to run this, it's going to print out the numbers 0, 1, 2, and 3. So if we're to run this, it prints 0, 1, 2, 3, and then it stops. It stops because this is a for loop. There are two types of loop in Python. There are for loops and while loops. Let's talk a little bit more about this. So here the code repeats instructions 4 times, and each time the value of I is printed. The first time I is 0, then it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. It stops before the number 4 because it started counting from 0. So there are two major categories of loops in Python. There's the for loop and the while loop. We're going to cover the for loop first. So for loops are instructions that repeat for each item in a set. The loop stops after the instructions have been performed on all items in the set. So basically for loops always have a stopping point, and that stopping point is after it's performed its instructions on everything inside of the container object. So in this case, range is a container object that's equal to a list of numbers. So after it completes all the instructions on the range of numbers, then it stops. So any object that can be referenced by index can be used in a for loop, including strings. So here we've got a string. It's animal. The variable animal is equal to frog. And for I in animal, in this case I means each index in animal, we're going to print I, and it's going to print out the letters in the string frog. So we can duplicate this over here. So likewise, this is going to print out each one of these indexes inside of this variable animal right here. So we run this, and it's going to print out each one of these indexes. Okay. So this is how we write a for loop. To write a for loop, we're going to begin with the keyword for, then a variable name that is only used inside the loop. Typically, it's going to be the letter I, and then in, then the name of the object to be iterated over, then a colon. So, for example, if we wanted to print out this this list right here, so here's a fun fact. This range function right here is basically a list with a number of numbers in it equal to whatever we supply to it. So range 10 is going to be the numbers 0 to 9 inside of a list. So it's going to print out each one of these numbers. So for each I index, it's going to print that out. On the next line, we're going to indent the line 4 spaces, then input the instructions to be run. So we're creating a programming block. So remember that anytime you see the colon in Python, that means we're going to create a programming block, which means that the next line has to be indented. So since a loop is a code block, all lines in the loop must be indented. All for loops iterate over the contents of an object, typically a list. In fact, the range function creates a list with a series of numbers depending on the arguments given to it. So if we were to print out what type of object the range function creates, it would say that it creates a list. So next we're going to talk about while loops. The other type of loop is the while loop, which unlike the for loop does not have an assumed end condition. So when we create a while loop, we have to create our own end condition inside of the while loop. Otherwise, it's going to become an endless loop, which is a bad thing. So this while loop here, there's a count variable over here, which is equal to 0. And while count is less than 3, it's going to print the value of count, and then count is going to increase by 1. So this symbol right here, plus equals, means that it's going to increase this variable, the value of this variable, by this number right here. So here the loop keeps running until the count variable is no longer less than 3. And each iteration of the loop prints the value of the count, then increases the value of count by 1. So count is equal to 0, then after the first iteration of the while loop, it's going to become 1, and then 2, and then when it becomes 3, then the loop is going to stop because count is no longer less than 3. So we can see that while loops and if conditionals are closely related, since each time a while loop iterates, it checks if its running condition is still true and ends if the statement is false. So each time the while loop iterates, it's going to check if its condition is true or false. In the example, the loop runs over and over again while the statement supplied to it remains true. Once the count variable is incremented to 3, then count is less than 3 returns false, and the loop ends. So we begin a while loop with the keyword while, then the statement to be executed then the statement that must evaluate true for the loop to execute, then a colon. So this is the statement that has to evaluate to true if the loop is going to execute once. And then a colon over here. Remember that colons indicate code blocks, and the next lines have to be indented over here. On the next line, we have to indent 4 spaces, then input the loop instructions. Typically, the last loop instruction progresses a variable towards a state where the loop condition will return false. So inside of while loops, we typically have an instruction that is going to progress the loop towards an end state. Otherwise, something bad is going to happen and the loop is going to be an infinite loop. So what happens if a while loop is coded in such a way where the Boolean statement will never return false? So the loop is going to never end naturally and creates what is called an infinite loop. So infinite loops in programming are bad. You just need to know that they're bad. So although there are cases where programmers want to create infinite loops in their programs, unintentional infinite loops effectively halt program execution, leading to system memory issues, crashes, or other problems. So this is another way of stopping a loop, a while loop, rather. So the break statement is an instruction we can insert into programming loops. When executed, the break instruction terminates execution of the current loop. So here we've got count is equal to 0, and while true, we're going to print out the count, and we're going to iterate the count to 1. We're going to increment the count by 1. So each time the loop runs, count is going to go up by 1. But if count is equal to 4, we're going to stop the loop. So inside of the loop, there is a condition which stops the loop, which is if the count is equal to 4. And then it's going to execute the break instruction. So this example also uses the while true style of loop, which is an infinite loop by default, and requires another means inserted within the loop to terminate the loop properly. For example, the break statement over here. So another statement that's used inside of loops is the continue statement. The continue statement is an instruction that stops execution in the current loop and begins a new iteration of the loop. So the continue statement doesn't break out of the loop, but it breaks out of the current execution, the current iteration of the loop. So basically it skips to the next iteration. So it differs from a break statement because it doesn't terminate the whole loop, just that one iteration of it. So this is a loop over here, which we can use to print if something is an even number or not. And in this case, for I in range. So we're taking a list which is which ranges from 0 to 4. And in this case, for each iteration of the loop, if the index modulo 2 is equal to 1, and remember modulo is the operation which returns the remainder after it's been divided by a certain number, it's going to continue. So if the number is odd, it's going to continue. But if the number is not odd, it's going to print this is an even number. So 0 is an even number, 2 is an even number, and 4 is an even number. But if this condition over here is not met, this print statement is not going to execute, and it's going to skip over to the next iteration because of the continued statement right over here. So just as we can use if conditionals inside of loops, we can use the else clause to execute instructions in the case that the if condition returns false. So I've got here, if for I in range 4, so it's going to iterate over 0, 1, 2, 3. If I modulo 2 is equal to 0, which means that it's an even number, we're going to print this is an even number. Else, we're going to print this is an odd number. So for every one where this statement over here is false, then we're going to print it's an odd number. But if it qualifies, which means it's an even number, we print it's an even number. So 0 is an even number, 1 is an odd number, 2 is an even number, 3 is an odd number, etc. So let's run through the programming loops exercise inside of learnpython.org. So we can just go over to the next tutorial, and I will include the link for everybody in chat. So this first section over here, it goes over the for loop. So for loops iterate over a given sequence. Here's an example. We've got a list of prime numbers over here, 2, 3, 5, 7, 4 prime in primes. So remember, inside of the for loop, typically we use the I as the variable, but we can use anything as the name of the variable to be iterated over. We could say I, or we could say primes, or we could say prime. But the naming of the variable here is just so that you can remember what is going on. So if you want to use the letter I, that's fine. But if you want to use a word so that you can better understand what's going on inside of the programming loop, then go ahead and use that. So this is going to print out each one of these numbers inside the list. So that is the simplest execution of the for loop. For loops can iterate over a sequence of numbers using the range and xrange functions. So this is where they explain that we can use the range function over here to create a list. So remember that range is a function that creates a list. So range 5 creates a list which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it stopped before 5 because this is 5 numbers right here, because it starts counting from 0. So we can also use the range function where it starts at a certain number and stops at a certain number. So if you use range 3, 6, it's going to start with the number 3 and it's going to stop before the number 6. So in this case, range contains the numbers 3, 4, and 5. And in this case, we can use range, the range function, with 3 numbers. And the first number is the number where it starts, which is 3. And 8 is the number before which it stops, which is the number 7. And 2, in this case, the third number in the range function is going to be the numbers it counts by. It's going to count by 2s, which means it's only going to include 3, 5, and 7, because it's counting by 2s. All right, so if we're to run this, we find that all of the above All of the things inside the comments over here are correct. All right, let's move on. So here we're talking about while loops. While loops repeat as long as certain Boolean conditions are met. For example, count equals 0. While count is less than 5, print out count. And then count is going to iterate, where it's going to increment by 1. So this is the same as count equals count plus 1. So the count is going to keep on going up, but while count is less than 5, it's going to print out the value of count. So if we're to print this out, if we're to run this, we see that the loop runs 4 times, but when count becomes 5, and then it tries to evaluate, if count is less than 5, this time it's going to evaluate false, and it's going to break. It's going to break out of the loop. Next, we've got the break and continue statements. Break is used to exit a loop, exit a for loop or while loop, while continue is used to skip the current block and return to the for or while statement. Here are a few examples. So we see here that we've got, in this first example, we've got count equals 0, and then we've got the while true loop. So while true is basically an infinite loop, and we have to look for instructions inside of this loop that are going to end the loop. So it's going to print out count. So, and then it's going to increment count by 1. If count is, if count is greater than or equal to 5, it's going to break. So basically, the instruction that breaks the loop is this one right here. So this is the condition which ends the loop. And in the second loop right here, for x in range 10, which means a list of numbers from 0 to 9, if x modulo 2 is equal to 0, which means that it's an even number, it's going to continue. Otherwise, it's going to print x. So this prints out only odd numbers, because in the case that it is not an odd number, it's going to skip the print statement. So it's going to go down to here, and if the number is even, it's going to skip and go to the next iteration of the loop. Okay, so can we use else clause for loops? So this is you certainly can. So here's a couple of examples. Richel, thank you very much for sharing your affiliation. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to print out. All right, so we've got count equals 0, and then while count is less than 5, it's going to print out count, and then it's going to iterate it's going to increment count by 1, or else it's going to print count value reached this. So what this loop does is that it's going to print out the number, it's going to increase the count by 1, but when count is greater than 5, it's going to print out count value reached 6. Sorry, it's going to print count value reached 5 because it starts counting from 0. Okay, and in this loop right here, it's going to do for I in range 1, 10, which means that it's going to start at 1 and it's going to end before 10. If I modulo 5 equals 0, it's going to break. Otherwise, it's going to print I. So basically, it's going to print. This is not printed because the loop is terminated because of the break and not due to the fail in condition. Oh, interesting. Okay, so this else statement will never execute because this break statement is going to happen first, and the break statement happens before the else statement, which means that this is going to print out 1, 2, 3, 4, but when it reaches 5, which is the condition to break, then it's going to execute and break before this happens. All right, let's move on to our exercise for today. This is a doozy. We're going to loop through and print all of the even numbers from the numbers list in the same order that they're received. We're not going to print any numbers that come after 237 in the sequence. So we've got this long list of numbers over here. And then we're going to write our code, okay? So everybody, let's do this together. So for IN numbers, we're going to print I. But we're going to check. What are we checking for? We're going to don't print any numbers that come after 237 in the sequence. So everybody, what is one way that we could check if the number that we're receiving is equal to 237? And if we see that the number is equal to 237, which programming instruction can we use to break out of the loop? If you know, please type in the chat. Sorry, it shouldn't be print I, it should be print number, because we're using the variable number over here. So if number, we're going to compare. So if number equals 237, we're going to do something. In this case, we're going to break. Otherwise, we're going to print the number. So I think this is all we need to do to finish this exercise. Oh, no. It says loop through and print all the even numbers. Okay. So if we can also check if it's an even number. So if number is equal to, so if number modulo 2 is equal to 0, is equal to 1. So we're checking if it's an even number. And in this case, we're going to continue. We're going to break out of that particular iteration of the loop. Next, we're going to check if it's 237, and if it's 237, then we're going to break. Wait, is that what we want to do? Oh, no. What we need to do is we need to put this at the end. We need to print 237. So this is the correct order here. So if the number is odd, then we're going to skip it. If we're going to skip it, otherwise we're going to print the number, but if the number is equal to 237, we're going to break out of the loop. Okay, so let's try running this code. Oh, I forgot to. Code cannot be executed due to a syntax error. Line 15, print number. Oh, we need to put it in parentheses, of course. Silly me. Okay, let's try that again. Your number object is not correct. You should use an if statement and a break statement to accomplish your goal. Number object. For number in number. Let me take a look. Okay, so I think my order is incorrect. Hold on. So I think what we need to do is put this condition up here. And then we're going to check if the number is even or odd, and then continue. Otherwise, we're going to print the number. Okay, so let's submit this. And this was the correct version of the code. So here, it prints out all these numbers up until 918. Where is 918 over here? Okay, so anyways, that is the end of that exercise. Before we finish, we're going to do a little quiz. So here, we've got this programming loop right here. For number in my list, print the number, then mylist.append number plus 1. So this instruction is going to add an extra number to the end of my list. So when will this programming loop end? It's either A, B, or C. Go ahead and type in the chat if you think you know the answer. All right, so let's go over what's happening here. So we've got my list, which is 3 numbers, 1, 2, 3. For num in my list, we're going to print the num. So it's going to print 1, and then it's going to add an extra number to the list. And then it's going to print 2, and then it's going to add an extra number to the list. And it's going to be 3, and then it's going to add an extra number to the list. Okay, so the answer is C. This loop will never end. And the reason that it's not going to end is that with each iteration of the loop, an extra number is being added to the end of the list. So basically, every time the list executes, it's going to print the number, then it's going to add an extra number to the end of the list, which means that the loop will never end. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at this next question over here. This one is a while loop. So while true, count is going to be equal to 0. Then we're going to print the count. And then count is going to be equal to count plus 1. So we're going to add plus 1 to the count. So if count is equal to 3, we're going to break. So when will this programming loop end? So after the number 2 is printed, after the number 3 is printed, or C, this loop will never end. All right, to answer this question, let's take a look at onlinepython.org. Okay, so let's try running this loop right here. So we're going to run this. This needs to be indented. Okay. So we see that when we executed this loop right here, it kept on printing out the number 0. So, and the reason why it kept on printing out the number 0 is that inside of the loop over here, it sets the count to 0. So the first instruction in the loop is to set the count to 0 and then print the count. So even if inside the loop we try to iterate and make the count higher, each time it goes back up to the beginning of the loop, the count is going to be set to 0, which means that the count will never increase. So the way we solve this is that we put count outside of the loop. So if we put count outside of the loop, then we can execute this loop properly. So when we run this, it only runs like this. Okay, so one last question before we finish off the workshop. When will the programming loop end? One more time, we've got count equals 0, and while count is less than 5, we're going to print count, and then count is going to iterate by count plus 1. So when does the programming loop end? Is it A, is it B, or is it C? Pre-shell answers C, this loop will never end. This loop, it will end. This loop will end. And the reason it's going to end is because the count is initialized outside the loop. And then it's going to print the count. And then it's going to increment the count by 1. So it's going to end after the number 5 is printed. So while count is less than 5, no, it's gonna go on until the number 4 is printed. Because when the count becomes 5, then the while state, this Boolean statement over here becomes false. So it's after the number 4 is printed. Okay, so all right, everybody. Originally we had a workshop exercise over here, but we've run out of time. So we're going to go over to the summary of what we learned in today's workshop. So we learned about conditions. So conditions are used in programs to determine a program's course of action. They rely on evaluation of Boolean statements to determine if certain instructions are performed or not. So if password is equal to my secret password, we're going to print password correct. Or else we're going to print incorrect password. Okay, so that was conditions. And we also learned about programming loops. So loops are tools that programmers use to run the same instructions multiple times. Okay, so everybody, loops can either run a preset number of times before terminating or iterate through all items in a list or string in the case of for loops. Or they can run continuously until a predetermined trigger state is achieved in the case of while loops. All right, in the next HackerFrogs After School Programming Workshop, we're going to continue learning Python with the learnpython.org website. And in the next workshop, we're going to cover functions. So functions is a big topic, so that's the only topic we're going to be covering in the next workshop. And remember, everybody, that the workshop that we're going to be The next workshop is going to happen on Wednesday, June 19th. So it's going to happen this Wednesday. Before you go, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to distribute the survey. So everybody, if you're with BGH, Black Girls Hack, please fill out the survey at this link. And if you're with Women's Society of Cyberjitsu, please fill out the survey at this link. So please let them know what I did well during this workshop, and tell them what I didn't do well during this workshop. Feedback is very important for improving the quality of classes going forward. And let's see. So we're going to be covering functions. It's a big topic, and that's what we're going to be covering. And the next workshop is going to be on July 19th on Wednesday. And we're going to be talking about all of these things right here. So everybody, at this point, I would like to introduce to everybody all of the different Python programming learning resources that we put together on this particular HackerFrogs comment thread. And I'll leave the link in the chat for everybody. Sorry. So we've got a list of education resources that are online and mostly free. And we cover a number of different websites where you can learn Python through different courses. So we've got ones for Skills for All, learnpython.org. Python Principles, Real Python, Online Python, W3 Schools Python, and Codecademy. But one thing that I would like to highlight is this course right here from skillsforall.com. So skillsforall.com is sponsored by Cisco, the big IT and networking company, and you can find it over here, and I'll leave the link in chat. There are 2 of these, and I've been working through this course over here just to see what is inside this course, and I can say that this is an excellent course. Although there is a lot of material to run through, and working through this material is going to take quite a lot of time, but it has a lot of great examples. It has an interactive Python code inside of the web page, which means that you can manipulate code while you're working through the lessons, and it is free. So it is so I think this is a great thing to start while you're going through the course, the Beginner's Python course with me. I will say that this is probably going to cover a lot more than what I cover in the course, but it is a rather time-intensive course, so it's probably going to take you quite a long time. Here it says that it's going to take you 30 hours or so, but I definitely recommend working through this course if you're interested in furthering your education in Python. But well, thank you very much to everybody for attending today's workshop. Like I said, the next workshop is going to be on Wednesday, and to everybody who attended today, I'd like to say thank you very much. If you have any questions about anything we covered in the workshop, please type in chat. Otherwise, we're going to be finishing off the workshop session in just a little bit. To anybody who's on Twitch and is interested in catching other InfoSec and or cybersecurity content creators, streamers, I have a list of different cybersecurity content creators. Oh wait, this is probably not the that's not the link I wanted to send. Hold on. This one is. Sorry everybody, please disregard the other link. This is the link that I wanted to send. So it's basically a list of different cybersecurity live streamers, of which I am one, and there are a lot of different communities and channels that cover cybersecurity content, and they all kind of have their own different flair and flavor to them. But let's send everybody over to this channel over here. So Demon0x2a. If you're interested and you're on Twitch, please participate in the raid and tell them that the Shy Hat sent you.